My grandma is a badass cook. Ever since I was little, I used to see her bake these amazing cookies and treats. They were really chewy, melting in your mouth with that really great flavor that was overpowering the whole house. And it really had a perfect hint of chocolate and salt. So when I grew up, I asked my granny to show me how to do it. So she made me look through like a 2-hour baking process. I was taking notes like crazy. And I went home, I baked those cookies, I went back to my grandma and we tried it. And well, they weren't very good. So I went back to my grandma's house and I was like, okay, let's do this together. Show me how to do it and let's do this together. So if you get to next slide. So we did this together again, and what really was outstanding for me was her capacity to really cross-correct along the way. So if you, have you ever looked at a dough and thought, does it have the good consistency? Is this ready to be put in the oven? Is this ready to be taken out of the oven? How do you actually know? What hints do you need to look at in order to know what to do next? So this is where it gets pretty similar to product, right? So this is what we're going to talk about today. Really, what do you need to look at in order to help you make the right decision and the next decision? Like a lot of times, we can have access to no data or to tons of data and information. And what information are you going to look for so that it really helps you take those informed and timely product decisions? And when I say informed, it's really around hypotheses that we get to validate or invalidate. And timely, it's really we want to learn a maximum of things with a minimum of time and effort. So I'm going to take you to a journey into finding the recipe to actually creating these feedback loops and into starting or continuing to introduce a culture of experimentation in your companies. And the way I define a culture of experimentation, usually in a company, is the number of people that can tell me, I don't have the answer to this question, but I know how to get it. And getting those answers is not always that easy. I'm sure you've all heard already, this is super critical. We can't miss this. We just need to do it like this. Or, well, you don't understand. We don't have time for this. I see a lot of heads saying yes here. So, and what's really critical here is in order to create this culture of experimentation, to make sure that everyone is on board with the fact that we really need to learn and experiment, and especially on the very critical things. So a way of really introducing this culture of experimentation is through what I call lean experiments. So the experiments are really ways of generating this tangible proof, and the lean part is minimizing waste. As I was saying, really, how can we learn with a minimum of effort? And an example that is a bit like an oldie but goldie, I think really shows this experimentation mindset is Zappos. So back in 1999, at a time where e-commerce wasn't really yet hype, the founder of Zappos had this idea or this intuition that people would like to buy shoes online, which was very far from being the norm at the time. So what we did is he didn't build an entire selling shoes industry, but he went to a nearby store and he took photos of different shoes. He created a simple HTML page and he put it online. And every time someone was buying a pair of shoes, he went to this next by store. He was buying the shoes and he was delivering the shoes himself. So just running this experiment and these actions during a few months helped him not only see that, yes, people wanted to buy shoes online, but also this helped him really learn a lot about the model of shoes that were trendy, but also a lot of things around the logistics of size, delivery, and how to get done through all that. So a lot of learnings with, in the end, a small cost in time, effort, and money. So now, how do we create this culture of experimentation within our teams? And it's really important that it is within the teams, because it needs to stay with the teams, and they need to be driving this. And maybe every team already has some rituals that do this, and maybe developers with the unit tests or the retros that we do as a team. What's really, really important is that you create multiple of these actions or rituals in the team so that you can create feedback loops. And in order to also do that, it's very important that the teams are empowered to make those decisions and to really own those decisions and those loops. So I'm going to share with you a few pushbacks that I've seen in time with different teams that were starting or continuing their journey towards this culture of experimentation. And one of the first ones, but something that I still see quite a lot, is the fact that the team is afraid of failure. And next slide, thank you. So even though the lean mantra, it's fail fast and is very well known by everyone, there are still a lot of product people that consider an hypothesis that was invalidated as failure, and that they are really, really afraid of failing. And what we really need to understand first is that having an hypothesis that is not validated is learning, and that's very, very important, because that will actually help us not spend time and money into something that won't bring any value for the business or for the users. So the only way that we would be failing as a company and as a team is if we're not learning. So as a leader and also as a product manager, it's really important that you create a safe environment, an environment where people can feel really at ease in proposing and running these different experiments, but also that you celebrate learning in all the facets of the learning, like the things that we validate and invalidate that help us actually drive these decisions in the future. Also, it's important that you show the teams another way of how to make decisions. Just by different ways of gathering feedback, different ways of thinking about the data, different workshops that you can do together, help them get out of just the same pattern. I've seen teams that run A/B tests for years, and then they just keep running A/B tests because that's what kind of they seen working at a certain moment in time, and they just keep doing it. It's really important to help them think what at this point exactly in time is that we want to learn, and what's the best way of learning it. Also help the teams, back. Yes, what are the knowns and unknowns? So a lot of times we know things about our clients, about our product, about our users. It's not very easy also to know to which extent we are biased or not, but we do not need to go and test everything. We can't, it's just impossible. So it's really important that you guide the team through, okay, what are our unknowns, up to which extent we don't know this, and how risky is this? And in the end, we're going to test the things that are the riskiest, the ones that can really kill our business and our product if we go into doing it without testing it. And it's also important, it might seem like basic or maybe people wouldn't feel good about it, but it's really important that you share theory about how to do this and what this is, and also that you share lots of examples. And I think examples are also very powerful. Like a lot of times with my teams, I really share like a presentation and a lot of actually very different examples from what I've done in the past. And with one of my teams, like I've seen like one of the designers and the PMs, they just picked on an idea. In the next 2 weeks, they were trying it out. So it can really create like a good momentum for the team to go for it. So don't shy away from being a little bit like a teacher mode, especially at the beginning, or if the teams, they're not very, very used to it, or they just do more or less the same thing. Also, make it part of the process. It's very important to be intentional about what you want to learn. Like a lot of times, I've seen PMs going, for example, to sales meetings or to customer success meetings, which are very full of learnings, and that's super interesting for us as PMs. But in this case, the meetings are not really driven by us. So we will be learning things, but we can't be as intentional about the learning as if we have a very specific objective and we run a usability test or user interviews or any other type of tests. So make sure that whenever you go into learning something, that you are clear about what you want to learn, and you don't pick up, well, sometimes random information can help as well, but it's not as formal and as helpful for your decisions as the intentional way of learning. Also, another thing is to insist on sharing what has not been validated. Like it happened to me a few times that, for example, one of my teams had just finished discovery process and they were sharing their learnings and they shared with me all the things that they validated, but none of the things that they didn't. So I asked what were the things that they didn't validate, and I kept pushing in the next weeks and bringing those up as like, oh, this is cool because we heard that wasn't working, like we won't be taking this decision or we won't be developing this. So I was actually kind of celebrating learning in all its facets, and this is very important as well. Something that can also help is to keep a list of experiments. It can help for different things, from more like your memory of all the different things you've done, but also for just listing the things that you have ongoing with their dates as well, just so that you don't forget when you need to stop certain experiments as well, which can happen in some cases. Another pushback that I sometimes heard was, I don't have the right tools to make the data-driven decisions. So yes, there are a lot of tools that can be very, very helpful out there, but something that I think it's really the mindset that is very important, and something that I push to the teams first is the fact that actually low cost and low technology works as well. And I have an example in the next slide that shows this, and I'm sure maybe a few of you already use this. So Pivotal Tracker, it's a tool that does backlog management, a little bit like Jira. And actually, they had this idea around feature around collaboration that will help teams work better. So their main question here was, do users really need this feature? So what they did is that they created this post in What's New, which was just saying, oh, like a new beta coming soon. And people could click to roll in the beta. So whenever they would be clicking, they couldn't have access to the feature because they didn't develop it yet, but they could subscribe with their email. So not only they saw that they validated their hypothesis around the number of people that clicked through, which was more than 10%, but they also actually had a list built in of people that they could contact later for usability testing or for other types of feedback, because they knew that these users were already interested in this. So next slide. Another pushback that we hear, or sometimes we don't hear, but you can feel it, is I don't know where to start. If we haven't done this before, or at least we haven't done this in a really structured way, it's not that easy to know where to start. You can always have ideas and try out stuff, but a little bit of methodology will always help. So something that I do with the teams is that I first show them a simple methodology. There are multiple ways of doing this, but I will just show you an example of something that I can share with the teams in the next slide. So first thing is always make the team write down the hypothesis. So a lot of times we think we are very clear on what the hypothesis is, but when we put different persons from the team tell us what the hypothesis is, we will see that the alignment is not always there. So first of all, make them write it black on white. Like for example here, let's say we have a problem around clients not finding the information they look for. So the hypothesis will really be, we believe that. So first, we also show that this is an hypothesis. So having an idea is not really something validated. By showing a chatbot on every page, the clients will find the information they look for faster. After we wrote the hypothesis, what we do is that we're going to come up with a test. So here, an example could be to create a low-fidelity prototype. And we will not stop at this definition of the test. We will also go a bit further into saying, okay, how many users are we asked and what are we going to ask to? So, for example, we ask 5 users what they would do to contact our company. And then, and very importantly, before we go run the test is that we need to define the validation criteria. And you really need to do this beforehand, because if not, your results will be very biased and you will have very long conversations with the team if this is actually validated or not. And in the validation criteria, it's always important to have, of course, numbers. This should be almost like a mathematical question around, is this validated or not once we run the test? And in this case, it can be something like 4 out of 5 users click on the chat. In some cases, it's also interesting to have what we call like an observable validation criteria as well. Like, for example, here, you'll need to take into account the fact that the users are with you in a room. They will put more effort into this than if they would be doing it by themselves. So if someone scrolls on the page 5 times up and down, and then they find this button and they click on it, it's not very likely that they would be doing this at home. So that's why we could have a second criteria, which is, and all users observe the chat at the first site. So what's also very important is to think out of the box. I think, as I was saying, a lot of times in B2B I hear, well, we will just create a prototype, send it to a few users, and we'll see. Prototypes work very well, but in some cases they're not the best ways of doing it. Sometimes we have a lot of like A/B tests that works very well as well. But sometimes it's really more valuable if you think out of the box and you create your own experiments for the situation you're in. And an example that I like from a project in the past is what I call the kit page. So basically, we were working on a dashboard and we were redesigning the homepage. And our main question was, what does the user want to see on the dashboard? Like, what information do they want to see, and what information is more important for them? So what we did is that we gave them basically a white page with different pieces of information, as you can see there. And we asked them to create their ideal page. So they could keep the information we put there, they could kick out information, or they could add information, as you can see on the yellow post-it. They added some information, and they also created, as they created their information architecture, we could see what information was more important for them as well. So this was really, really valuable for us, because if we would have gone with creating a prototype and testing with our initial ideas, we would have needed to go through like 4 sessions of prototyping, so basically maybe 4 weeks, before getting to the same learnings as we did with this kind of experiment. So another example. Another example is what I call the triple track for discovery. So Uptime is a company that does an IoT platform for maintenance for elevators. So basically, our clients are companies that do elevator maintenance. And it's an industry that is pretty technical and very, very specific. So back at the time when the founders started the company, what they did is that they created a maintenance company, and they run it as a business for actually quite a few years. And well, not only they use the technology in order to empower this company to become a better company in what they were doing, but we are also using our internal client in order to create this triple track. So basically, whenever we have this very bold idea that is based on a lot of data and a lot of like information of how the business works, we will first run it through our internal client. Once this is de-risked, we will go and refine it with our clients, and then we would have the third part of the triple track, which is the delivery part. And even in the delivery part, sometimes we can test it first afterwards with the internal client before going more at scale. And one last example, it's a project that I did on an online tool, assistance tool. So basically there was a big company that had 7 different tools for online assistance, but none of them were really working. So clients were really unhappy, they were calling, there were a lot of costs, a lot of frustrations involved. So they asked us to recreate that online assistance part. So what we did is that we started with some user interviews just to understand better what the problem was. And when we started the interviews, basically we were asking people, what would you do if your whole system breaks? And we started having some interesting answers, but we realized that actually it was very hard for the persons we were interviewing to project into that situation. Like they were sipping a coffee in the center of Paris, chatting with us. It was really hard to be like, oh my God, like there is a horrible situation happening. And then we were also asking, when we were asking them, what would you do? They would say, most of the time say, well, I would just call the person in charge and I would tell them to fix this as soon as possible. And we were asking them, but what would you do if you would do it online? So it was just a second level of projection that was biasing our interviews. So this method that usually works really well with the discovery interviews, in our case, was completely not conclusive. So we decided to go for some ideas around how to solution this. And as the main problem of the users was, I search for the information, I need to search for information. Well, the obvious answer for a solution was, well, we're going to create a search, right? Like you're searching, a search button, that's perfect. So we debated with the team and whether to test this or not, because it seemed very obvious, like creating a search for people searching for information. And we did test it. And what we saw, it's that actually it was inconclusive. It failed. People didn't go for the search. They didn't want to click in the search. The search was in the middle of the page, really big. Like we made it really obvious, but it didn't seem to be the main entry point for the clients. So what we did afterwards is that we took a step back and we were like, okay, we still need to know what's the best way for our users to navigate to the new help center. So what we did is that we created an ABC test. Like we had multiple ideas, and in that case, it wasn't it was the main question, like which one would we choose, and we couldn't choose by ourselves. So we ran an ABC test. We also used the search, but in a different setting, by still giving it another chance. And the result helped us see that the best solution was to implement a drop-down menu. But interesting thing is that the company had zero data about what people were looking for. So even though we knew we created a drop-down menu, we didn't know what to put in that drop-down menu. So we started creating feedback loop by actually implementing, we can switch to the next slide, by implementing a search, but a fake search. So it was a very low-cost search, which was taking to some existing pages that actually took us like half a day to build. And even though we knew that most of the people wouldn't go through the search as a final solution, we knew that some people would still use the search, and that would start creating our data engine into what people look into. And in half a day, and then waiting for a few days to get those results, we would have the data that we need in order to start creating actually our menus and the whole arborescence of data afterwards. So I'm getting to the end of my presentation, and just to go back to the cookies again, I think, as I was saying, it's really important to cross-correct along the way. Like I don't have the strawberries from my granny's garden. I don't have the same eggs from the local farm and so on. So my only chance is to really, cross-correct along the way and think of what's the next, like what ingredient to add, when to add it, and what does this look like. So I think it's the same with product. Don't only be passionate about the product you're building, but also about the experiments you need to run, the questions you need to ask, and also the data, the next data that you want to gather. And only then you can enjoy your cookies. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Great. So we are going to start the Q&A. We got a few minutes, so you can either do it on Slido or raise your hands. We're going to ignore that we're in the middle of the Scorch trials right now. So are there any questions for Alexandra?
You were talking about metrics for validating a test. 4 out of 5 users click on the chat or see it. How do you come up with those numbers? What is a good estimate?
Wow, that's a great question. I think it depends. I think it depends a lot. Like it depends on the stakes. It depends on the experiment you're running. Like in some cases, you will really need to work with person that is experienced with data in order to tell you what's really representative. But in some cases, like early stage cases, and maybe where you have like clients that are pretty representative and you don't have too many typologies of clients, you can also go with something that is less costly, as I did in my example. So I don't have a perfect recipe, but I think it's also, well, a lot of times like talking to people in analytics and discussing this as a team and debating it, it's really useful. And then I think it's also like kind of learning on the way. Like, for example, once we had an A/B test that actually the ABC test, I was giving that example. The company, like the politics of the company didn't allow us to do more than a certain percentage of users. So we settled for a certain duration. I think it was like a few days. And we saw we didn't get enough answers. And actually we had like a 30% for the ABC test. So it wasn't conclusive. So we got back to it and we're like, okay, we're going to leave it for a few more days. It wasn't a fail on our side. It was more like, okay, we're learning, like next time if we need to do this volume, like we'll just need to leave it a little bit longer.
Cool. One up on the board. Hey, and look, they're getting involved in the presentation. Would you consider experimentation a skill you get better at by doing it a lot, just like baking?
Yes, for sure. For sure. I think first it's not that easy by default to start thinking about, experimentation. I think we're all human beings. We have ideas, and the first instinct is just to push your idea. As a PM, you can go there and be like, well, not really be a good PM at doing this, but like sometimes we want to push our ideas. So just challenging yourself, your ideas, and the ideas of the team, it's already like a skill that you can get better and better at. And also by leaving your ego aside. And then I think it's also a next level of skills of how you think about your experiments, as I was saying it. Like sometimes people will think about the experiments, but without a methodic way of going for it. And also about how you enrich your different types of experiments. Like I wouldn't say that someone who has done, like a designer that has done for 10 years only prototypes has the highest skills in experimentation. So I think, yeah, for sure.
Great. How do you understand what change? Oh, here we go again. How do you understand what change might kill you? Kill you product.
Your product.
Kill your product. I'm guessing is kill your product, not kill you.
Yeah. So usually, what we do is that once we have a problem that we have prioritized that we want to solve, we're going to go into sort of how might we statements, like how can we solve that, and you have different solutions. And usually, what we do is that in those solutions, we're going to phrase them as hypotheses. And we're going to start thinking, okay, so this is where like how risky it is or how likely it is to kill our product. And some of them are obvious. Like, for example, if you have like if you have just a word change and you're not in a B2B, in a B2C very critical, and the funnel part, then you know that that's not going to kill your product. You can change that naming for certain industries and it's okay. Versus if you want to create a dashboard that adapts to the user by themselves and so on. So I think if it's hard, if you have a lot of hypotheses and it's hard to know, I would always go back to, what's your strategy, what are your OKRs, what are your objectives, which of these like your clients could be more or less inclined to do. So really finding other ways that are more measurable or in assessing risk. And most of the time is always, I suggest doing it with a team so that everyone is aligned on what's risky or not.
So last question, just because this was upvoted, so we definitely got to just ask it before, but how do you find the representative group of customers for your experimentation?
Wow, a hard one. Well, I think it depends. Like, I think the question is great already from the fact that it's like representative group. I think it's very important that you think, who should I test with? And really choose those persons well. Then it depends. Like I think I worked a lot in B2B. You already have with customer success, like already like clients and list of clients, and in time you can create like kind of privileged clients that you know more about, or you can also launch like in product even experiments, as I was saying earlier, with the ones that were subscribing with their emails, so that you can create those lists yourself. I think there's always a conversation around like, would we have a bit less representative people or not versus not having anyone. It's also a question of speed. Like you don't want to wait for 2 months before getting your clients. So I think, yes, ideally you need to go for those representative ones. You can also hire companies that do find the people for you. It's more expensive. It depends on the industry again, but it can work. So, yeah.
Give it up for Alexandra.